Hiero or the Tyrant, a discourse on despotic rule, Chapter 1.
Okay, I shall take it away. Once upon a time, you got to correct my pronunciation. Simonides?
Simonides?
Simonides. The poet paid a visit to, help me out with
Hiero?
this, Hiero, the tyrant.
Yeah.
And when both obtained the leisure requisite, Simonides began this conversation.
Would you be pleased to give me information, Hiero, upon certain matters, as to which it is likely you have greater knowledge than myself?
And pray what sort of things may those be? Answered Hiero, is that
Yeah.
which I can have greater knowledge than yourself, who are so wise a man. I know, replied the poet, that you were once a private person, and now a monarch. It is but likely, therefore, that having tested both conditions, you should know better than myself, wherein the life of the despotic ruler differs from the life of any ordinary person, looking to the sum of joys and sorrows to which flesh is heir.
Would it not be simpler, Hiero replied, if you, on your side, who are still today a private person, would refresh my memory by recalling the various circumstances of an ordinary mortal's life? With these before me, I should be better able to describe the points of difference which exist between one life and the other.
Thus it was that Simonides spoke first. Well then, as to private persons, for my part I observe, or seem to have observed, that we are liable to various pains and pleasures in the shape of sights, sounds, odors, meats, and drinks, which are conveyed through certain avenues of sense, to wit, the eyes, ears, nostrils, mouth. And there are other pleasures, those named of Aphrodite, of which the channels are well known. While as to degree of heat and cold, things hard and soft, things light and heavy, the sense appealed to here, I venture to believe, is that of the whole body, whereby we discern these opposites and derive from them now pain, now pleasure. But with regard to things named good and evil, it appears to me that sometimes the mind or soul itself is the sole instrument by which we register our pains and pleasures, whilst at other times such pains and pleasures are derived conjointly through both soul and body. There are some pleasures, further, if I may trust my own sensations, which are conveyed in sleep, though now and by what means and when precisely are matters as to which I am still more conscious of my ignorance. Nor is it to be wondered at, perhaps, if the perceptions of waking life in some way strike more clearly on our senses than those of sleep.
To this statement, Hiero made answer, and I, for my part, O Simonides, would find it hard to state, outside the list of things which you have named yourself, in what respect the despot can have other channels of perception. So that up to this point, I do not see that the despotic life differs in any way at all from that of the common people.
Then Simonides, only in this respect it surely differs, in that the pleasures which the tyrant enjoys through all these several avenues of sense are many times more numerous, and the pains he suffers are far fewer. To which Hiero, nay, that is not so, Simonides, take my word for it. The fact is rather than pleasures of the despot are far fewer than those of the people in a humbler condition, and his pains not only far more numerous, but more intense. That sounds incredible, exclaimed Simonides. If it were really so, how do you explain the passionate desire commonly displayed to wield the tyrant's scepter, and that too on the part of the persons reputed to be the ablest of men? Why should all men envy the despotic monarch? For all the self-sufficient reason, he replied, that they form conclusions on the matter without experience of the two conditions, and I will try to prove to you the truth of what I say, beginning with the faculty of vision, which, unless my memory betrays me, was your starting point. Well, then, when I come to reason on the matter, first of all, I find that as regards the class of objects which these orbs of vision are the channel, the despot has the disadvantage. Every region of the world, each country on this fair earth, presents objects worthy of contemplation, in quest of which the ordinary citizen will visit, as the humor takes him. Now, some city, for the sake of spectacles, or again, the great national assemblies, where sites most fitted to entrance the gaze of multitudes would seem to be collected. But the despot has neither part nor lot in these high festivals, seeing it is not safe for him to go where he will find himself at the mercy of the assembled crowds, nor are his home affairs in such security that he can leave them to the guardianship of others, whilst he visits foreign parts. A twofold apprehension haunts him. He will be robbed of his throne, and at the same time be powerless to take vengeance on his wrongdoer.
Perhaps you will retort, why should he trouble to go abroad to seek for such things? They are sure to come to him, although he stops at home. Yes, Simonides, that is so far true. A small percentage of them no doubt will, and this scant moiety will be sold at so high a price to the despotic monarch, that the exhibitor of the merest trifle looks to receive from the imperial pocket, within the briefest interval, 10 times more than he can hope to win from all the rest of mankind in a lifetime. And then he will be off.
To which Simonides, well, granted, you have the worst of it in sights and sightseeing, yet you must admit you are large gainers through the sense of hearings. You who are never stinted of that sweetest of all sounds, the voice of praise, since all around you are forever praising everything you do and everything you say, whilst conversely, to that most harsh and grating of all sounds, the language of abuse, your ears are sealed, since no one cares to speak evil against a monarch to his face.
Then, Hiero, at what pleasure do you suppose mere abstinence from evil words implies, when it is an open secret that those silent persons are cherishing all evil thoughts against the tyrant? What mirth do you imagine it is to be extracted from their panegyrics, who are suspected of bestowing praise out of mere flattery?
Simonides made answer, yes, I must indeed admit, I do concede to you that praise alone is sweetest, which is breathed from lips of free men absolutely free. But look you, here's a point. You will find it hard to persuade another that you despots, within the limits of those things whereby we one and all sustain our bodies, in respect, that is, of meats and drinks, have not a far wider range of pleasures. Yes, Simonides, he answered, and what is more, I know the explanation of the common verdict. The majority have come to the conclusion that we monarchs eat and drink with greater pleasure than do ordinary people, because they have got the notion they themselves would make a better dinner off the viands served at our tables than their own. And doubtless some break in the monotony gives a fillip of pleasure, and that explains why folk in general look forward with pleasure to high days and holy days, mankind at large, but not the despot. His well-stocked table groaning from day to day under its weight of viands admits of no state occasions, so that as far as his particular pleasure to begin with goes the pleasure of anticipation, and the monarch is at disadvantage compared with private people. And in the next place, he continued, I'm sure your own experience will bear me out so far. The more viands set before a man at table beyond what are sufficient, the more quickly will satiety of eating overtaken, so that in actual duration of the pleasure, he with his many dishes has less to boast of than the moderate liver.
Yes, but good gracious. Surely, broke in Simonides, during the actual time before the appetite is cloyed, The gastronomic pleasure derived from the costlier bill of fare far exceeds that of the cheaper dinner table.
But as a matter of plain logic, Hiero retorted, should you not say the greater the pleasure a man feels in any business, the more enthusiastic his devotion to it? That is quite true, he answered. Hiero, then have you ever noticed that crowded heads display more pleasure in attacking the bill of fare provided them than private persons theirs? No, rather the reverse, the poet answered. If anything, they show a less degree of gusto, unless they are vastly libeled.
Well, Yarrow continued, and all these wonderfully made dishes which are set before the tyrant, or 9/10 of them, perhaps you have observed, are combinations of things acid to the taste, or pungent, or astringent, or akin to these.
To be sure they are, he answered, unnatural viands, once and all, in my opinion, most alien to ordinary palates.
Yarrow, in fact, these condiments can only be regarded as the cravings of a stomach weakened by luxurious living, since I am quite sure that keen appetites, and you, I fancy, know it well too, have not the slightest need for all these delicate made things.
It is true at any rate, observed Simonides, about those costly perfumes with which your persons are anointed, that your neighbors rather than yourselves extract enjoyment from, just as the unpleasant odor of some meats is not so obvious to the eater as to those who come in contact with them. Euro. Good, and on this principle we say of meats that he who is provided with all sorts on all occasions brings no appetite to any of them. He rather to whom these things are rarities, that is the man who, when some unfamiliar thing is put before him, will take his fill of it with pleasure.
It looks very much, interposed Simonides, that if the sole pleasure left you to explain the vulgar ambition to wear a crown must be that named after Aphrodite. This is we get to the sex part.
Okay.
For in this field is your privilege to consort with whatever fairest fair your eyes may light on. I like that expression. Hiero. Nay, now that you have named that one thing of all others, take my word for it, in which we princes are worse off than lesser people.
To name marriage first, I presume a marriage which is contracted with some great family superior in wealth and influence bears away the palm, since it confers upon the bridegroom not pleasure only but distinction. Next comes the marriage made with equals, and last, wedlock with inferiors, which is apt to be regarded as degrading and disserviceable.
Now, for the application, a despotic monarch, unless he weds some foreign bride, is forced to choose a wife from those beneath him, so that the height of satisfaction is denied him.
The tender service of the proudest souled of women, wifely rendered, how superlatively charming, and by contrast, how little welcome is such ministration where the wife is but a slave, when present barely noticed, or if lacking, what fell pains and passions will it not engender?
And if we come to masculine attachments, this is the gay part, still more than in those whose end is procreation, the tyrant finds himself defrauded of such mirthfulness. Poor monarch, since all of us are well aware, I fancy, that for highest satisfaction, amorous deeds need love's strong passion.
But least of all is true love's passion, wont to lodge in the hearts of monarchs, for love delights not to swoop on ready prey, he needs the lure of expectation.
Well then, just as a man who has never tasted thirst can hardly be said to know the joys of drinking, so he who has never tasted passion is ignorant of Aphrodite's sweetest sweets.
So Euro ended. Simonides answered laughingly, how say you, Euro? How is that? Love's strong passion for his soul's beloved, incapable of springing up in any monarch's heart. What of your own passion for Dilochus? Did I get that right? Dilochus, surnamed of men most beautiful. Hiero, that is easily explained, Simonides. What I most desire of him is no ready spoil, as men might reckon it, but rather what it is least of all the privilege of a tyrant to obtain. I say it truly, the love I bear Dilochus is of this high sort. All the all that the constitution of our souls and bodies possibly compels a man to ask for at the hands of beauty, that my fantasy desires of him. But what my fantasy demands, I do most earnestly desire to obtain from willing hands and under seal of true affection. To clutch it forcibly were as far from my desire as to do myself some mortal mischief.
Were he my enemy, to wrest some spoil from his unwilling hands would be an exquisite pleasure to my thinking. But of all sweet favors, the sweetest to my notion is the free will offering of a man's beloved. For instance, how sweet the responsive glance of love for love, how sweet is the questions and the answers, and most sweet of all, most love enkindling, the battles and the strifes of faithful lovers. But to enjoy one's love perforce, he added, resembles more an act of robbery in my judgment than love's pastime. And indeed, the robber derives some satisfaction from the spoils he wins, and from the pain he causes to the man he hates. But to seek pleasure in the pain of one we love devoutly, to kiss and to be hated, to touch and to be loathed, can one conceive a state of things more odious or more pitiful? For it is a certainty, the ordinary person may accept at once each service rendered by the object of his love as a sign and token of kindliness inspired by affection, since he knows such ministry is freed from all compulsion, whilst to the tyrant the confidence that he is loved is quite foreclosed. On the contrary, we know for certain that the service rendered through terror will stimulate as far as possible the ministrations of affection. And it is a fact that plots and conspiracies against despotic rulers are oftenest hatched by those who most of all pretend to love them. End of part 1. Well, that was fun.
Yeah, was this ever staged? Is this a dialogue ever played out on stage?
Not that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It's not a very well. It's a minor piece. It's a minor work of the authors. So it's.
I could easily adapt this for if I was doing a film, like they like to do modern adaptations. This dialogue would actually be interesting to. I could pick like a 2-character and have a very current setting that people would get. So it would be just think of someone in an office, like a regime, and
I don't know, Peter Thiel talking to his secretary.
Well, if we want to be literal, like whoever we think of as a tyrant.
Well, the tyrant. I mean, I think the tyrant is just the rich, powerful man, right?
Yeah. But we get to stick that scene. Imagine that they are flying. This taking place in a business class on the plane, a private jet, and then there's an entourage, which would be Simonides, and then there's either CEO or someone flying to, I don't know, Davos, for example. And we'll be having this conversation, and
Yeah, no,
it'd be interesting. Yeah, but I totally got. So what Hiero was saying is I can think of comparable. They're not complaints. Like back in classical China, that's the thing. People always envied the people who live in the Forbidden Palace, but they didn't know that the whole Forbidden Palace is actually one giant booby trap. Literally, I mean, you can't drink a cup of water. You have a fine feast, but there's always a taster.
Right, because
everyone is trying to lop off everyone. And every concubine that says they love you is just, no one really loves you. It's just they have a goal. So I don't know.
well, that's the whole point of the dialogue, and I'm somewhat familiar with how it ends, but I don't want to spoil the ending. But the point is, it evolves over 11 chapters to sort of explore. So what does it all mean?
Yeah, I mean, but it's hard to still elicit any sympathy from me. I mean, because you also get what Simonides is saying. But
right, Simonides like, well, you get to bang whoever you want and eat like awesome food and do whatever you want all day. That's pretty sweet life.
Yeah, so if you just focus on just the immediate pleasure of it, the sensation of it, everything's fine. But I guess Hiero is saying, well, I'm a human too. I deserve to be truly loved. He says, well, you can't have both. Just make up your mind. Which one do you want? I mean,
But that's the interesting question: is we all want power and fame and money, but then the point of the dialogue is to say, okay, well, now that you are that. You're Jeff Bezos, right? You're the guy everybody wants. Every hot piece of ass in the world wants to be in front of Jeff Bezos because he can make you a star. And suddenly, if you're Jeff Bezos, you're sitting there like, well, nobody loves me for me.
Yeah.
And it sort of sucks because they actually are all plotting and scheming to like get something from me.
Is this, how many parts are there to this?
11.
Okay, we have a long way to go. But I'm gonna guess it not to spoil the movie for me, but they come to a understanding. Is this really like who has it worse? Basically, trying to figure.
No, it's more of it. It's a surprise ending. And in many ways,
he ends up banging Simonides.
Right, exactly.
Is that what it is?
I don't think so. I don't. It's been a while since I've read it, but I don't remember that from the plot.
Tell me more about. I can't get his name right. Dilochus.
I don't know. I think he's just more like the hot guy.
Okay.
He's more just like
the name is named specifically. So when Hiero mentions Dilochus, it's almost like Simonides. Simonides know who he's talking about. Dilochus.
He's probably like he's I don't know. I'm sure it's a small town, so everybody knows everybody. I'm sure they're all like, oh yeah, that guy.
Yeah,
I see him in the marketplace.
Yeah. So and Simonides was the one who brought up Dilochus.
Right.
He's
like, well, we all know who you like.
And then he was like, yeah, let's talk about Dilochus. I mean, he was.
So
I didn't quite get clear how he feels about Dilochus. It's like.
Well, he wants to be, he wants to be truly loved.
Yeah. So if he's consistent with his assessment about those in his inner courts and those who hang out with him, he would have to assume that Dilochus is not he wouldn't know Dilochus' true intention. That he probably is part of him that can guess that Dilochus is enamored with him to want to sleep with him, but he's not, just because he's the tyrant.
Dilochus, like every cute actor hanging out in some rich guy's penthouse apartment in New York, right?
Yeah, so maybe he could be a gold digger. We don't know.
But how could he? I think the point that Hiero is trying to make is, how could he be anything but a gold digger? Like, look who he's hanging out with. He's hanging out with me, or not? He's hanging out with Hiero.
Well, you hear stories of people who go on dating apps or go date, but they don't reveal their income. So
right, they don't get any dates.
They don't get any dates.
It's like you've sadly discovered that nobody loves you for you.
So I don't know. Is this shaping up also to be a commentary on larger things,
Well, yeah, that's the whole point.
values, society, and values, and just that's what it is. So I can't imagine this is setting us up to be to elicit sympathies for those in positions of power, but perhaps at least to show us that they are.
You got to remember, we're dealing with Greek morality here, which is all pre-Christian. So there's no notion of individual good or evil. It's more about sort of ideas, and it's more vibe than Christian. Like, I think it's very important you don't try to put a Christian lens on this, because this predates morality. It predates Christian morality. It's got a lot more of the Greek idea of morality, which is a lot more. It just doesn't really care about human dignity very much. It's more about power and just realpolitik, and just kind of just accepting reality the way it is.
But they have a notion of love, different types of loves, and they have a notion of loyalty.
But there's no like in from a Christian perspective, or a sort of a post-Christian perspective, right? We all have this, like, everybody deserves to find love, everybody deserves happiness, right? Like, we in our sort of progressive worldview, we all want to create a world where everybody finds love and happiness and success and lives happily ever after. The Greeks,
I don't think,
it's never going to happen.
Again, I think this is some of the things I like talking about, because this is probably the Protestant thing. That's not how the Protestants see it. It's like you can't necessarily find it in this world. That's the thing. You're supposed to you find it in this world. Yeah, you're not. You can't find it in this world. I mean, try to emulate as much you can in this world, so you can make it to the next world, kind of thing, where you can experience it at least.
We're talking like the Disney approach to, the kind of Hollywood, Walt Disney approach to modern life, which is, and they all lived happily ever after, and we all want the fairy tale. Like, the Greeks would have just been like, that's stupid. Why would you? It doesn't work that way. Why would you
setting up people for failure? I think a lot of marriages have been busted, because destroyed, because people were brought up to have expectations that it would be happily ever after.
Right. The Greeks would have said,
I think one of the things you told me, I don't know whether it's appropriate to put it on recording, but that's fine. You said once that it's as good as it's get, and that's, I think, a very profound idea, that you should be happy with. I don't mean like if you're in a super abusive relationship, you should stay there, but sometimes it's as good as it's get. So and it's okay,
Yeah. Well, the point isn't happiness, right? The point is just to make your life work together. Yeah. And some days work and some days don't, and it's like, that's just how it is, and you just barrel forward and try and figure it out.
Yeah. But if we want to bring it back, now we're talking a bit about happiness. Like, how would Hiero define happiness?
I think he's more looking. I don't think he wants to be happy. I just think he wants to know if it's true or not. Right? He wants, like, the genuineness. He just thinks everyone's lying to him. I think the Greeks are more looking for, like, they want to keep it real. If we wanted to use like a modern expression, they don't want bullshit. They want reality.
Yeah, that just brings up another interesting topic about the happiness, because I think you're right. Maybe that is a Disney product, the notion that you got to be in constant happiness, and it's interesting for me to find out how the classical Greeks approach what they, what is the optimal mindset for you to function daily, every day, and be a functional human being. And it's not necessarily to walk around with a yellow smiley face. That maybe that's insanity. That's like mental illness. Why are you so happy? Like, in advertising and agency, we always define stock photos in our
Right.
hero image. Yeah, and after a while, you know, it kind of wears on people, so that even when you release an ad to the market, people would just see like that brand is insane, because why do the people, they don't look normal? Why are they so happy?
Well, who gets happy about diarrhea medication, right? It's like,
Well, why cancer medicine? Why so happy? Why are you
right.
smiling? So,
But there's some modern idea that happiness is somehow owed to us, and I think we could get into. I think we should wrap up soon, because I think we've come pretty far, and I think we'll have opportunities to revisit these themes. But I think it also goes back to the sort of 19th century notion of the state, instead of simply being a repository of power, that it becomes a force for good. And that shift is when the state becomes a force for good, then the state also has a role to play in creating happiness, right? You see this in the American life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And somehow it's the state's job to help you pursue happiness, which to a Greek would have just been like absurd, right? They just wouldn't have like got it. They would have said, "What?" Like, it's like if the state's job to help you cut your nails or something.
that's not how I read the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, though. But okay.
No, I don't think it's how they meant it when they wrote it. I think it's evolved into that.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Gotcha. Because I understand, because it was written. It was officially a state document to England, so I understand what you mean. Like, people do quote from it, like, okay, this is the state's prerogative for you to ensure that you are happy. Are you happy?
Right.
It was like that. Are you happy? Well, be happy, you know?
Exactly. Because if you're not, we can fix you. It's just like, no, I'm happy. Oh,
Out the
everything's
window,
good.
you see, we're ready to make you happy.
So, so this is more, I think, maybe it is a sort of meditation on happiness, but as a sort of, they want realness, not happiness, right? Is Hiero wants to know if these things are true, and he says that the regular man knows whether or not things are true, because it's like the biblical parable about, it's easier for the camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get to heaven. And one of the explanations of that I liked was that the reason that it's hard for the rich man to get into heaven is because nobody will ever tell him the truth, because they just want something from him. And so nobody ever tells the rich guy that he's being a jerk. So the guy just runs around being an asshole because nobody corrects him, because they all just want to get paid. It's like a friend of this guy knew years ago, he was a monstrous asshole, and he had trouble keeping any friends. The only people that would hang around him were his dog walker, the woman that cut his hair every week, and the real estate agent that kept hoping to get his business. And, the guy eventually kills himself because he's such a pain in the ass that nobody wants anything to do with him. But,
oh, wow. And he killed himself, and he like Hiero was waiting for him in heaven. Or
so, there's a good example of somebody who, could have anything he wanted. He was a great looking guy, smart, successful, like nothing wrong with this guy. And he but nobody would ever tell him. And if somebody tried to tell him, he would get angry and not listen. So on that cheery note,
okay,
maybe it's important. Maybe happiness isn't all it's cracked up to be. Too much happiness can lead.
Yeah, too much happiness is like you're just sucking on helium at some point. At that point, you're not happiness. So
too much happiness can lead to unhappiness.
Yeah. So
all right.
Okay.
Bye.